Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the special edition of NTWC Live. It's Tuesday. I know, and you're seeing us on a Tuesday, but it's good to see you. I'm live on South Padre Island today on the quiet side of the Gulf of Mexico. I'm happy to be here. Bill's in the Houston area. Hal is in Florida somewhere. We're going to give you an update on what's happening with Idalia, which is looking to be a significant impact storm over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours in parts of Florida. So we're going to take your questions here in just a little bit. We may have some other people joining us in just a little while. We got a number of people who are trying to click on, kind of in the middle of harm's way. So we'll get to them in just a bit. But let's start with Bill Reed, former director of the National Hurricane Center, to give us an update on what Idalia is doing right now and what we're looking at for it. And then we'll get to Hal, who's wandering through the strike zone in Florida in just a little bit. Dr. Hal Needham's over there. So let's start with Bill. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. We have another potentially catastrophic event showing up for the folks in Florida, sad to say. Let me share the screen here and we'll get right to it. All right, this is I'm starting with currently with the water vapor loop. Several things we can see on here that I've been noticing, especially different since yesterday. Yesterday we had a lot of westerly to northwesterly shear on the top side of the storm. You can see the way the cloud tops are rapidly moving northward off the north side. We had great outflow on that side, great outflow on the east. We've had good outflow on the south all along, and I think the west side, the westerly shear there is abated quite a bit because we're starting to see some outflow at the top level in there going on there. Other features I think you can see in here is it looks like we're getting close to clearing out some of the cloud-covered eye of Idalia as it continues to develop while it's moving north. And you can also intuitively tell from this image that it's moving much faster than it had been yesterday. And you can start to see the encroachment of a trough in the westerlies across Texas and the Mississippi River Valley. That's going to play a role in where this thing goes next. The visual image this morning, get this thing refreshed on us. Shows pretty much the same thing. It's quite a large circulation. There's a lot of convection now in all the quadrants, and the outer rain bands are affecting the marine areas off the Florida coast and even down into the Keys as we speak this morning, and of course over Cuba. Speaking of Cuba, we've had good radar coverage of the storm from the Cuba radars this event, and you can see the continuous heavy rain bands coming into the western side of Cuba. I'm certain they're getting some serious flooding and flash flooding as it goes out of that. Courtesy of Mr. Brian McNulty, we have a regional radar loop. I'll update it here. I can't remember the last time I reloaded it, and it'll come up. There we go. So we'll get a long radar loop of the system as it parallels the coast of Florida. Again, pretty decent eye feature. If this far away from Key West, we're capturing both the entire circulation around the eye. The convection's probably a lot stronger than what looks there. We're shooting into the top part of the storm. And you can start to see these outer rain bands intensify this morning on the northeast side of the storm. Recon's out there. This is the Noah bird flying this morning. The pressure is not dropping much at these early hours, which is a little bit of a surprise. We thought by now we'd start seeing the onset of maybe the rapid intensification, but at least for now, we're not seeing that. Michael Lowry, many of you know, he's attended our conference a couple of times. Puts out an excellent blog every day on the tropics. And this slide was in his blog this morning, showing the trend in the super ensemble forecast. Earlier, it was forecasting a little bit south of where Hal is, and the forecasts have been slightly to the left on each successive model run of the super ensemble since then. An interesting characteristic, several of our more recent storms, it's been the other way. The trend has been further to the right. But this time, so far, the trend has been a little to the east, and we're kind of running out of time for much change in the forecast. There's a very well-defined steering current, and it's moving at a high clip right now, so the chance of it deviating much from the forecast track between now and landfall is narrowing. There's not much opportunity for that. This is a 700 to 300 millibar averaging winds and humidity there. It's kind of a good, quick and dirty way to see the steering channel that the storm's in, with the south to north flow right over the storm as it comes north. And the other thing I noticed is the dry air doesn't get into the storm right up through landfall. So I don't actually see any real inhibiting factor other than time. It's going to run out. It's going to be in a favorable environment with the hot ocean, the good outflow, and the good moist unstable air that it already has going with it to have rapid intensification. But it probably has, I don't know, 12 to 18 hours before it starts interacting with land to further intensify. We'll see. After that, it gets picked up by the westerlies for a while. It comes off the East Coast and then slows down off the East Coast, but it's enveloped with dry air by then. It doesn't seem to be an issue for that. Though, if you look at the longer part of the models, it does an Ivan. There's a much weakened version of it that actually loops back around on the GFS. It comes across Florida into the Gulf, which is just insane. Let's see if we got the new maps here now. There we go. There's the new advisory. Same as the old advisory. I don't see any significant change in their forecast at this point. Rapid northward motion for this part of the globe of accelerating up into the Big Bend of Florida. Somewhere between early morning and midday, it's going to cross the coastline and move across the southeast U.S. One of the interesting things on the impacts here, let's see if I got an update on this one. Oops, that was a mistake. Why did that do that? That should not have done that. There we go. There we go. I like these graphics, but I'm kind of new to using them, so you'll have to forgive me if I've butchered them a little bit. This is the wind impact graphic. It shows I'm almost certain this is gusts. Because of the faster speed, you can see they've increased from the earlier forecast. Now they show the gusts greater than 110 miles an hour all the way up through into South Georgia, with hurricane force gusts into much of southeast Georgia to the coast. Anywhere in this swath, there's going to be a tremendous amount of tree damage and some structural damage. Obviously, the older housing stock and mobile homes and things like that are highly vulnerable to this strength of wind. Once again, Tallahassee even is going to have a lot of power issues there because of all the trees and the above ground power lines. And I think that'll be the second story after the big story, which is the near record or record surge anticipated on the coast of Florida. I don't know if we've had an update on this yet, but we'll see. Oh yeah, I got to promise not to do something wrong with this. And then zoom back in. Okay, I don't see any real change in the storm surge warning area from BOR. It's a large area that's going to anticipate the threat from overland storm surge flooding, given the high risk areas that are along the west coast of Florida and out into the Panhandle. And the peak forecast, they've jacked it up more. I think I'll have to look at the details, but we must be looking at a somewhat stronger hurricane coming inland now with this advisory 10 to 15 foot above ground. That is huge. And find out a little bit here about that. Yeah, he's gone a little bit stronger on the intensity, and given the large size of the storm, the two of those combined is a good reason to forecast a peak surge higher than what we had before. And once it comes across South Georgia into South Carolina, we're going to have a storm surge threat on the Georgia, South Carolina coast. This, even though it doesn't sound like a lot, this is enough to cause significant flooding in places like Savannah and Charleston, especially if it comes in at high tide. These are the detailed maps on that shows just how far inland the severe flooding can go, starting in the upper end of the Appalachia Bay, and then down around the Big Bend coast is where the most severe of the flooding is forecast. But even in the Tampa Bay area, while this does not look like a big deal, there's a lot of infrastructure located in these areas shown at risk of the of storm surge flooding at this time. So remains to be seen. This is a 10% exceedance forecast, but once again, we have the Tampa Bay area in a risk of storm surge flooding. Rainfall, it's moving fast. I think while there is a flash flood risk at that, the rapid movement of the hurricane should hold down the extreme amounts that we've seen in some of the other storms recently. And this looks like a reasonable forecast at the 6 to 10 inch maximum level, with some probably isolated totals that'll get higher than that if they get repeat bands across them. Of course, we have the tornado threat in the right front quadrant out ahead of the storm today. And then again tomorrow, all along the east side of the storm, we'll still have the shear present in the lower levels to induce the tropical cyclone and generated tornadoes. And one last thing before I turn it over to Hal is Weather Tiger had on their post yesterday that there was only this picture that only showed one major hurricane making direct landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. So I set out to verify it and pulled up this graphic from the historical hurricane track site. And sure enough, 1896, there was a major hurricane that caused severe flooding in that part of Florida and quite a bit of damage across northeast Florida as it exited the region there. I couldn't find any information on significant surge from the 1894 storm. And Hal mentioned that we've got, before the period of record, the 1850 period of record, that we've had a report of a 20-foot surge at St. Mark's prior to when that was in, like in 1850, I think. And on that note, Hal, how about filling us in? What you up to?
Bill, thanks so much for the update there. I mean, talk about, it's like a real-time update with the new advisory coming out. It's hard to even wrap your mind around a storm intensifying so much. Hard to see the surge levels forecast as they are and the wind impacts as well. I'm in Steinhatchee, Florida, really right at what potentially could be ground zero, right there on Appalachia Bay. It looks like if the latest model runs verify, we could really be getting the eye wall here and getting that 10 to 15 foot surge. So really concerned. We know when they ran slosh models, I talked to Jamie Romey and he said, potentially the worst storm surge in the U.S. could be in Appalachia Bay. It's a concave shape of the bay, the shallow water on the coast. You can just very efficiently pile up storm surge there. I was really, I don't even know the words to say it. I'm slightly sleep deprived, but I ended up talking to a lot of locals this morning about flood risk. And this woman said, well, in lower parts of town, they have concern with that. But in this neighborhood, we've never flooded. And her neighbor said, the water never gets over that hill. Well, we pulled up the P-surge, basically probabilistic surge maps. This is a neighborhood that the locals said, we never flood. We're not worried at all. P-surge said there's a 30% chance that neighborhood will see 4 feet of surge above ground level. And so, we went back and we were showing them P-surge maps and telling them, look, even if you're going to evacuate, get those family photos off the ground level. I've talked to so many people who said, I never thought my house would flood. the big picture here, I think we could see unprecedented flooding way beyond what they've seen before. That's in the cards. It could happen. The second thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to turn my camera angle here, but really coming down through Tallahassee, through Perry, just this part of the country, what hits you is just all the trees, tons of pine trees, tons of oak trees. I mean, everywhere you go, I'm driving here, I'm in Steinhatchee, Florida, extremely wooded. And from my experience, you get winds, even stronger tropical storm force winds, you're going to get a lot of tree falls. I mean, imagine you start getting different category hurricane winds in these areas, and just the tree damage through these roofs is going to be, I think, tremendous. Even if we only had Cat 1 winds, the fact that we're looking at, potentially Cat 3, or they should maybe even be prepared beyond that. I think the wind damage also, if you happen to be above the surge level, I think we're going to see a lot of wind impacts as well. So, I'm here, I'm forming a plan. I like to document it as well as I can. Obviously, I want to protect myself as well, but I'm just really concerned, not only seeing the wind and water forecast, but also for talking to locals who aren't evacuating or really are not taking the flood risk, especially. I think they're getting the wind risk, and a few of them said they're concerned about trees, but again, it's what we faced in so many other communities. I've been here 30, 40 years. We've never flooded. They're not even thinking about flooding in an area with a 10 to 15 foot storm surge forecast. And I shouldn't say everyone, but at least the people I talked to, that was the general consensus.
We'll come back to you, Hal, in just a second. Thanks for being there. And Bill, when we come back to Hal, pull up one of your maps again. We'll show where he is. I know Steinhatchee, but unless you know Florida, you don't know where that is. So when we get back to you. But also joining us this morning in Orlando is Brooks Garner. In Mobile is Alan Seals. Let's get you guys in on the conversation. I see, Alan, you're unmuted, so let me bring you in. And again, we've kind of got this storm surrounded. You're off to the west of it. Brooks is kind of off on the eastern edge of it. Alan, tell me what's going on in Mobile to watch this thing go by, hopefully to your east.
Yeah. First, I have to start off with a disclaimer. I got out of bed 29 minutes ago, and people often forget that those of us on TV doing the late news, we go to bed late, we wake up late. So thank you, Bill, for that awesome discussion, because you have fully updated me as to where things are going. So in the Mobile area, fortunately, which is southeastern Mississippi, southwest Alabama, and northwest Florida, Pensacola area over to Destin. Fortunately, the sense I get as I'm trying to inform the people who watch me on TV and social media is that this is not going to be a direct impact storm for us. And the trends, which have been remarkably consistent. It's amazing. You go from storm to storm, and I made the point that day after day, all the models are basically doing the same thing, and that gives us high confidence to know that it's not going to make a sudden turn. In any event, for the Mobile area, even though we are going to have a north breeze, the concern is going to be a perigee moon. Moon's a little closer to Earth, higher than normal tides, and then a north wind, which means that places like Fort Morgan Peninsula, Destin, Dauphin Island will actually get a little north wind, creating storm surge on the northern sides of those peninsulas or islands. So that hopefully will be the worst scenario we see. What's been good already, just the whole pattern transformation, is we are finally getting rain. And for folks who haven't kept up in Mobile, this month so far, we hit 100 degrees or more 11 times, which in a normal year, we hit it once. So that's a record. We already have had 12 record highs, tied or set. We actually had some record warm lows. So this is a welcome change for us. It's not welcome for Northwest Florida.
Thank you, Alan. That's a great perspective from where you are. Then we'll come back to you in just a second. Brooks, in Orlando, kind of on the other side of things, but you're no stranger to these storms going in one coast to the other, and you get the inland impacts. What are you guys looking at in Orlando?
It's true. Well, first off, Bill, thank you for that briefing. And yes, we were concerned about a wobble to the right, as we saw with Charlie in 2004 and, of course, Ian last year. The best laid plans seem to go unfurled last minute sometimes with these. So I'm happy that there's a higher confidence that it's going to head to our west. Selfishly happy, but we've got a unique DMA because while we do cover the Orlando counties, we also telecast our signal to the Gainesville market. So we're covering ground zero. Dixie, Levy, Gilchrist, Alachua, all the way down through Citrus counties. just even part of Citrus County. That's technically Tampa DMA, but we catch a piece of it. So if this thing does head into, say, Horseshoe Beach, I mean, that's a landfall technically in our viewing area. So one of the big challenges we've had beyond just making the forecast is trying to figure out how to safely deploy reporters. Because as Hal mentioned, hey, Hal, by the way, good to see you again. With that kind of surge, you got to watch out for your safety. And if we have crews on Cedar Key and then the surge comes in, they're going to be stuck there. And then there's no way to get out. There's no real high ground. A funny aside, a family member of mine lives over on St. Simon's Island in Georgia, so they're worried about it as well. But her best friend was about to close on a condo. The closing is for tomorrow morning. And I said, you guys hold off for a day or two, make sure the condo is still there before you close on that one. So they were able to delay the closing.
Yeah,
which was one of the
I would call my realtor and say, I think I've got COVID. We better postpone this.
exactly.
So let's go back to Bill now, and Bill, and you can start the Q&A if you will. But if you would, again, when we go back to Hal, show where Hal is on the map, if you would, Bill. Share your screen again, and just pick one of those maps and kind of point out where Steinhatchee is and where he is in relation to everything.
Better yet, the fantastic world of Google Maps.
Look at that.
He's just down the road in Fish Creek.
Hey guys, just something else that I picked up here. I live in Galveston, where we have so many waterfront homes that are second homes for people in Houston, right? I came down here and realized there's no big city an hour away or 2 hours away. These are a lot of retirees, maybe on limited income, coming down from Michigan and New York and Pennsylvania. I remember from Ian last year, a lot of retirees out in Fort Myers Beach with, they have kids in Cleveland that can't come and get them and they're stuck. I think the retiree angle, that's something we picked up really quick here this morning. This isn't a lot of vacant second homes. This is a lot of first homes for people and a lot of elderly people too.
Yeah.
Are they getting out? Are they leaving from what you can see?
Tim, we talked to these two women for about 15, 20 minutes, and it was just interesting seeing their thought process. They were leaving, but they were going to Gainesville. I mean, Gainesville could easily see Cat 1, Cat 2 winds, but they were going with a family member there who lived in a mobile home with trees there. That was their Gainesville situation. So it just shows you people sometimes are leaving, but, maybe not going to a place that's that much more secure.
Yeah,
And too, we had a couple reporters up there in Cedar Key right now, and a lot of people aren't leaving. They say they've seen it before. They survived Hermine, and they're going to survive this one.
Yeah, again, it's the people I've seen, all the emergency management people and the politicians have all been very strong about the run from the water, hide from the wind. So I actually think Gainesville is probably they can get there quickly. The other ways, you have to go a long way to get to another place where there might be a substantial amount of buildings you can shelter in. You got to get them out of that surge zone, and that's what I've got up there now, is showing where you are. There's just no good story right now for the Steinhatchee area.
Yeah, Bill, you're right, and you're right. At least if they can get out of the surge zone, right, they're going to have a lot better outcome. At least good chance of a better outcome.
Yeah, get out of the surge zone. You don't want to be stuck in your car parked under a tree, that kind of thing. You need to get to a substantial. If you can get to a substantial building, you'll be all right.
What's the population? Go ahead, Bill.
Chasers are going to go. I don't think there's any high-rise parking garages within 100 miles of where you are, and that's what I would want to be in if I was wanting to watch this thing come inland.
Yeah, Bill, you're right. There are not many parking garages. It's something I always look for. There's a surprising amount of relief, though. There's a river there. There's a lot of low-lying coastline, but there is some relief. I think we could get a car up above the flood zone again, just kind of getting the lay of the land and talking to people. I guess I was surprised. I think back to Hurricane Barry, actually, in 2019, a June hurricane in Louisiana. I went down to Sippermore Point down by Vermilion Bay. It was a ghost town. There was not one person there except the police, who told me I can't be there. Very different situation here today. Tim, you asked the population. Where I'm at, population about 1,500. But, some folks are leaving, but a lot of folks are staying.
Yep. That Southwest Louisiana, it's one of those rare places where the historical storm Audrey is almost a religious event every year to remind people what happens if you stay.
Well, and Bill, they've seen Rita, they've seen Ike, they've seen all these events. Laura, you get into Southwest Louisiana, places like that have seen so much. I think you don't need to remind people as much. Like you showed on the map, I mean, Appalachia Bay, we haven't seen a major hurricane since before 1900. So I think people just don't really know what it's about, perhaps.
Yeah. This is the other problem with staying there, and is being flat like that. The roads are going to flood with this kind of rain. So if they're going to go, they got to go now. They got about 6 hours of daylight to play with.
So
I was going to ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brooks, what do you tell people?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, one of the concerns, and Hal, it's topical because you're Galveston based, and with the great storm in 1900 in Galveston, I remember the storm surge outran the hurricane by, I think it was 12 hours. And so people didn't even really know it was coming. And then the water started rising and it already started cutting off some of the routes to get out of there. I'm wondering if with this one also, since it's, I guess at least it's been slow moving, I know it's going to pick up speed. Do you guys think the storm surge is going to outrun the hurricane force wind? So if people decide they want to finally get out, it's going to be too late anyway?
I don't really think that's about it. It's kind of tricky how the storm surge works there on the west coast of Florida with a north moving storm, but it's moving fast. It's already moving 14 miles an hour.
Yeah, so that surge would have to be going more than that to outrun it. Yeah, that's a good point. No, I think that the big thing for us is also, since the area hasn't really been tested in a long time, at least in that section, you got 100 years of tree growth. So clearly there's going to be an infrastructure issue with power lines and stuff like that. But 100 years of trees is a lot of branches and limbs that are going to be falling. And as was mentioned, with a lot of mobile homes there's a lot of retirees on Social Security that just don't have that nest egg to have a substantial house. And so there's just a lot of folks that are living in possible flood zones, but also tin cans under giant trees. So there's going to be a lot of that stuff going on too. So what do you tell people like that though? If a lot of folks we've encountered just don't have any money. And so the idea of evacuating, going off to a hotel for a week 100 miles away isn't even a possibility for them. So it's been a tough.
The emergency managers that I've seen in all those counties have said that there's transportation can be made available, and there's sheltering at no cost. So that shouldn't be an inhibitor if they get the word.
Human nature is the inhibitor, the desire to be in your comfort zone with your pet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more cranky you are about having to get in your car and go somewhere. Speaking as a 74-year-old.
Well, let's get outside of the strike zone for a second and talk about places like Fort Myers. They're under a tropical storm warning. There could be a surge there, and obviously still recovering huge way from Ian. Have you guys that are in Florida seen or heard anything from down south and what they're preparing for down there? A little bit of a surge, it looks like, and places that certainly don't need any issues.
Yeah, I've been following Matt Divitt on Twitter, our Wink TV chief that came to speak at the conference, who was in the heart of Hurricane Ian. Just the vibe from there is it sounds like obviously the PSTD is still strong and all that stuff. So even if they get a 2 or 3 foot surge, that's going to be something that's definitely an alarming thing. But as you mentioned, Bill, with Tampa Bay, if they get a 4 to 6 foot surge, that's going to be a huge deal. Have we hit on the tornadoes on the east side of this thing? Because that's one of our bigger concerns. A lot of the high resolution, the cams are showing classic, like almost Hurricane Gilbert style bands of rotating thunderstorms coming through. First one comes through this evening, at least in the Orlando region. Then we get another big push tomorrow morning around daybreak. So we're a little concerned about that too.
Yep, there's the today's outlook, and then tomorrow they may be underplaying your risk there. You're right, but that ridge is building westward pretty fast behind it. So I think this is probably a pretty good thing. You may be on the margin of it with the stronger risk being Jacksonville northward along the coast.
Yes.
There you go. The tornado risk specifically there, what, 5% for
tomorrow?
Yes,
yeah.
For tomorrow. Okay.
Doesn't sound like a lot, but given what happens in these, that's actually a pretty high risk.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, circumstantially sensible weather. It's super humid right now. I'm outside in my little Florida room back here. I know it's kind of like blurred behind me, but the dew point feels like it's sitting around 80 degrees. And so it's just juicy. And yeah, if there's any rotation coming into those bands, I wouldn't be surprised if we had some spin ups. Big challenge we've had too is sometimes we'll have these tornadoes going 60 miles an hour. So there's really little warning, and they're only 15-minute warnings. And so it's just playing whack-a-mole, trying to get people.
Yeah, we had all those tornado signatures over us in Harvey. And how can you go out afterwards? How can you survey the damage? Everything's flooded. Everything's damaged. So how do you discern what was done by a weak tornado versus other aspects of the storm? Ike was the same way. I had some evidence of higher streak of damage through some trees just north of my neighborhood here from Ike. But I went back and looked at the Doppler on wheels data a little bit. It looked like there was a pretty good spin up in there, but it's tough to find those. And like you said, warning on them is half the time. By the time you get a warning out, it's already done. Yeah,
that's right. I remember with Harvey, it was just it was like 80 tornado warnings, and then it just became a point where it was like wallpaper. It was like, oh, another tornado warning, Pasadena. Meanwhile, there's people up to their necks in floodwater. It's like, what's the more important warning at that point? So hopefully we don't have that situation coming up tomorrow. But we're getting ready to do our 12 on, 12 off shift. So like Alan mentioned, I'm on tonight till 3 a.m, and we'll see if I can get home. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. Now the endurance begins.
Are the parks closing?
That's a really good question. The entire regions that are a tropical storm warning right now, the closest hurricane warning is Sumter County, which is like the I-75 corridor. So basically along and west of I-75, it's all hurricane warnings. I know the public schools are all closing tomorrow. They're open today. Very good question about the parks. I'm not sure. I'm guessing they would. I think that'd be kind of hazardous to be walking around Disney World with 60 mile per hour. Who knows?
The airports, are they canceling? Flight cancellations pretty big in there? That would also affect what the decision making at the parks.
That's true. I have not been privy to that. I've been tunnel vision on the weather, but I'm sure they're probably going to start doing all that stuff pretty soon.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
Going by now, so I think they're probably still open right now.
Yeah, I think I saw the TPA was closing pretty early. I don't know if they're closed yet or not, but they were closing down. Hey, Alan, you talk about that backward storm surge basically on the north side of the barrier. We see that here on South Padre too when the storm goes north of us, and these little bayfront homes and restaurants flood, where the surf side doesn't have any problems at all. So you may see a little bit of that, is what you're saying, on the bay side, if you will, the land side of the island.
Yeah, and there's a fine line between storm surge and, I guess, tidal flooding and coastal flooding. But either way, rising water, Dauphin Island, which is the southernmost part of Mobile County, that little sliver that runs east to west, Fort Morgan Peninsula, which is adjacent to it off of Baldwin County, just to the west of Gulf Shores. And by the way, today's the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And then, of course, across through the beaches of Florida, all the way toward Destin, you have that same little sliver of land and some bays. So initially, we're going to have that northeast wind pushing things toward the southwest. And then as it goes inland, we'll have more of a north wind pushing things due southward. As always, people with the higher lunar tide cycle, not only are your high tides higher, your low tides are lower, and people will always be surprised that the water levels in Mobile Bay are lower. And then they'll say, well, the water is being sucked out by the hurricane. And I try to educate them that, no, it's not being sucked out. It's being pushed southward.
Yeah. The search model actually picks up a little. There's a few blue pixels there on the back side of the island.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point. We have the same problem in Galveston Bay. The city of Galveston, a lot of it flooded from water coming in from the bay during Ike rather than from the seawall, prevented it from coming in from the Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you guys have work to do, especially Brooks and Hal and Alan. So let me just get your concerns. Let's kind of finish up with that. Let's start with Alan. Just what are your concerns in your area for this storm and what you see down to the east of you?
Actually, for my area, the big concern is rip currents and people going to the beach and getting in the water, making this an adventure and a spectacle just to see what's going on. And we lose so many lives to rip currents, and even for an approaching storm to Mobile Bay area, we lose lives before the storm arrives because of rip currents and dangerous surf. So that would be my big concern.
Always a concern. Thank you, Alan. We appreciate that. Brooks, what about Orlando and your market all the way to the coast?
Yeah, and we cover Brevard County and, Cocoa Beach all the way up through Flagler County, Flagler Beach. And as Alan said, same thing here. Looking back at Hurricane Ian last year and also Nicole to follow, I mean, rip currents killed people before the storm even hit. We also had people dying in there's like a spate of ladder related injuries and deaths from people preparing their homes before the storm. Is odd. And by the way, if you're over 70 as a man climbing a ladder, don't do it before a hurricane, because that was the demographic of casualties. I think we had like 6 people. It was weird and terrible. So, but kidding aside, yeah, we've also got a storm surge on the East Coast possible between 2 and 4 feet. We've seen this with the rising sea levels, that we lose the beach entirely. And so there's concern of run up with some of the water coming up on the East Coast. Otherwise, it's all about tornadoes here. Not so much of a flood threat. This thing's moving. The core is going to be about 100 miles west of Orlando. So it's going to be isolated tornadoes, gusty squall, winds 60 miles an hour, sporadic power outages. The big target zone, of course, will be for our Big Bend counties. It'll be for Fox 51. It's a station we broadcast. We cover the Gainesville Fox market. So that'll be a totally different can of worms up there. And of course, you're going to have the full force of tree falls and everything, storm surge. Our biggest concern is going to be storm surge. If they get a 15-foot storm surge, I mean, that is just going to be like Hurricane Ian down in Southwest Florida.
Thanks, Brooks. We just think about everybody that's out there in the path of it. And just for the record, I'm giving away my stepladder. I'm not 70 yet, but it's time to get rid of it to eliminate the temptation. Hal, Dennis Steinhatchee, you've been there for a little while now, a few hours at least, and you kind of shared some of your concerns. What are you looking out for?
Yeah, my biggest concern by far, like Brooks said, is the storm surge. I mean, if we saw a 13, 15-foot storm surge here, I'm seeing a lot of complacency. I think a lot of people are completely unprepared for that. And that's my biggest concern, are drowning deaths here from surge. Secondarily would be big time tree falls on houses. I think that'll be almost too much to count in this part of the state. So I think that's a 1-2 punch, but the surge would be the bigger punch for me.
Stay safe where you are. Find a good place without the parking garage nearby. I hope you find a good spot to be. Thanks, Al. Be safe out there. Bill, bring us home. What do you see?
What the hell's a stepladder? Oh. Actually, I actually share Hal's concern. The demographic that he described, a lot of retirees. There's probably a lot of, I'm guessing there's a lot of folks there that are lower income situations. So they got a bunch of negatives that encourage them not to leave. And even if they don't get flooded, the power is going to be out. It's going to be hot. I think we're learning now that the long-term stress effects of being in the aftermath of a hurricane is causing a larger loss of life than we know about, because we have to figure out a better way to document it. It's what it is. So I really am concerned about that part. And then I wonder about the cities on the East Coast, like Jacksonville on up, since it's hitting west there, that they may be underplaying just how bad they're going to get whacked with wind damage and power outages. We will see.
Well, let's hope for the best. We'll be back, some of us tomorrow morning at the regular time slot at 10 a.m. to see where we are at that point and see how this has already impacted a number of markets and whether it's about to move in and do what it does, or if it's already moved in some places. So, guys, thank you. Brooks and Alan, especially, thanks for taking time out of your day. I know you're busy. Thanks for taking time to be with us. And thank you for your concern. We have recovered here on South Padre from Harold. I had to move my welcome mat back about a foot. It moved. That was the impact. We have fully recovered. That was a full week ago. So be safe out there, everybody. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for your insight as always. And Hal, again, stay safe in the middle of this thing. And hopefully we'll be able to get in touch with you tomorrow morning to get an update from you. So that's it for today. We'll be back at 10 a.m. tomorrow with another live update. And of course, our regularly scheduled program. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of NTWC Live Hurricane Center Podcast. If you did, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. And join us next week. This is NTWC Live.